We are live.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Founder Hacks, our podcast where we identify something that we have read, something we've seen, something we have learned to share with you that's been a source of inspiration for the founders that we work with. Let me start by saying a huge hello to Mr. Anthony Enright.
Hello, Ben. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Anthony. And an equally humongous hello to Mr. Alex Moore.
Hello, gentlemen. Good to see you both.
Always a pleasure. Okay, let's kick straight off. I believe this week we're going to start off with something that Alex has seen. Alex, would you please share?
Yes, we try to give these, when we do our editorials, we try to give each of the three sections, a heading. And this one, I talked about when to stick your nose in. And I thought this was an interesting from a cultural perspective. And that's something that really is, I put a lot of importance in that in the businesses that I've helped set up. And I just thought this was really, really clever. So it was an interaction that I had on one of the businesses. They will remain nameless because it's a live business with real people and people's we protect the innocent, change the names to protect the innocent. But it was quite interesting. I was exposed to this, but I wasn't in it. There was a call. There was a sales call. It was done on Zoom, and there were two colleagues pitching to a contact of mine, but I wasn't able to take place. So afterwards, I phoned up and said, "How did it go?" And one colleague went, "Well, I think it went okay, but I think the enthusiasm of our colleague didn't allow the person we were pitching to answer the questions very much." And so really, I went, I'm not sure about that. Maybe you should have a chat with the MD. So later, I was like, oh, that's a shame. And then I went to speak to the MD. I said, look, got some feedback on that. And the MD was really, really interesting. And he said, well, if that colleague felt that way about the other colleague, that colleague should tell that colleague directly. I'm not saying anything. I thought, well, that's really interesting. That's really quite powerful. That's only his opinion, and this is how rumors start. This is how bad sort of culture starts, right? Somebody says one thing about somebody else. If you've got a problem with somebody, tell them. Don't report to me and then ask me to tell somebody else. It's like, why didn't I think about this? It was very interesting. So then I just fed that back, and we had and then I quietly wrote to the contact. Went, heard that you might not be able to ask, some questions. He goes, no, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it went really well. I really, really like this person. Brilliant. What an asset to your company. I thought, isn't that interesting? Isn't that a wonderful way of dealing with something? Just to have a culture. This is fairly new business. Have a culture that, if you've got a problem with someone, you tell them. And it might only be a problem that isn't a problem. It might only exist in your own head. And instead of looping in 4 other people and this carrying on, deal with it straight away. And I just thought it was brilliant. All my years in business, I forget stuff like that sometimes. And, it took the MD to say to me, hey, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not telling him. He should tell, So I just thought it was really good. I want to throw that one out to you guys, back to you two, to have your thoughts on this. And what do you think, Ben? You look like you're chomping at the bit to answer this one.
I guess because I absolutely agree with it. Actually, that for me, giving feedback is a skill. Right, we all know that being able to do it in a way that gets you to the place you want to get to is a skill. It takes some practice. But for me, the most important part of it is it always has to be authentic. If you're giving feedback about something that you have not seen yourself, or that you have not experienced yourself, or that you don't entirely agree with, I don't think it rarely lands with somebody in the way that feels good. It lands as so-and-so said so-and-so feels this about someone. And how exactly do you expect someone to react to that? It can end up, for me, speaking to a sort of very hierarchical organization where someone at one level in the company matters more than somebody else, and that might be true in some circumstances, of course, but nonetheless, I think it takes something away, and also every time you're passing on a second or third hand piece of feedback, I think you're robbing someone of an opportunity for a decent, honest conversation. So for me, I think it's vital. And yes, of course, there are moments where a company needs to have some formality in the exchange of feedback during an appraisals, or if you're doing, a proper 360 process. But for me, that takes the formality, right? So that's a different thing. In the moment feedback, I think it should always be given from the person who has it to give. Whether it's upwards, downwards, sideways, whatever it is, just give it, just say it if that's what you think. And it's okay to be wrong as well. The problem is if that feedback were passed on and it ends up with this MD then having that conversation with that person, what defence has that person got? What possible opinion could they offer? What possible explanation could they offer? None. Because it's not the MD who saw it. So it's like you're setting up for so much failure. So and as you say, and actually when you then go and get a second opinion, it's a completely different one. So I think you're dead right. It is culture. This is the essence of culture that we're talking about here. But look, Anthony, I know you love a bit of feedback. What do you reckon?
I do. Well, I do and I don't. If it's good feedback, I love it. If it's bad feedback, then no, thank you. No. So when we finished out, it's funny. I had a conversation. We did a session. Face-to-face session last week, and we always do a survey at the end, and when the survey results are good, I'm always like, we need to forward them on to everyone in the team so they can see, and then I was reminded, if we're going to start that precedent, regardless of the feedback, the scores and the feedback, it needs to be passed regardless of whether it's good or bad. And I was like, absolutely, we need to get into a habit of everybody seeing, because it may not just, it's not always just down to the person that's delivering that particular session. It's teamwork, so it's important that the team see the feedback whether it's working or not. And I think there's two things that crop up for me on this. The first is that, because I was going to start with this second, but actually you've just been talking about it, Ben. I don't think it's just about culture within a business. I think it's about a culture as a nation. Whilst I believe the business in question is quite diverse, and we have a lot of people from different with different backgrounds, different nationalities. I think we do have an issue in the UK where we don't like to be that direct, and we want to, whilst we feel those things, we're not very good at giving feedback, and we're a bit shy about it, so we'd love somebody else to do it. And I just couldn't agree more that actually to get into that kind of culture of going, no, if you think that person hasn't performed that well, you have the conversation. And maybe they need some help in coaching around that, so they can actually go back and say, well, how do you think that call went? I was a little bit concerned about this. What do you think? So you're actually coaching that individual, but training our staff to coach. So it comes across in the correct manner. But actually the bigger thing for me here is that there's always two sides to every story. And the biggest thing for me here is where that individual thinks that the call went really badly and was concerned about a colleague's performance. Actually, why not find out from the end user, whoever was on the end of that? Why not find out first? Actually, what did they experience? Which obviously eventually happened, thank goodness. So for me, I'm always looking at both sides of the story, always, because I've got my fingers burnt in the past where somebody's come up to me and said, God, they performed really badly, this is the problem. And I dove straight in, and then actually 2 days later I heard from the end client that went, no, that was absolutely phenomenal. It's the best call I've ever had. And you think, wow, okay, I've really got to get my facts straight, and I've really got to understand both sides of the story. Because it could just be down to how you're feeling that day or how you think things should be done. And actually, we're living in a new world now, right? Working virtually, it's different styles. We don't know what works and what doesn't. So let's try things, but let's get the feedback from the end user. Let's find out from them what they like and what they don't before we react.
I also think, just to build on that point, both can be true. It doesn't have to be either or. And actually, I hope in that situation, Alex, you did go back and say, actually, this feedback should be given. This feedback should be given, because if it's not given, it then has potential to fester and rot and become a resentment. So even if it's not true. That still feels like a conversation that probably should happen if it's some feedback that's there, combined with the fact that what the actual outcome was with the person who was on the call, the other person who was on the call, we thought it was good. So I like to think we could have build cultures where there can be that genuinely open flow, but also all in a context where feedback's just feedback, right? It's not truth, it's just perspective. And if we can build that positivity and that that trust within the culture, where it's like, look, I'm going to share it with you just because it was my authentic experience of you. It might not be the truth. That's up to you to work out, but it's there.
And actually, I was thinking about that, Ben, going, oh, I'm not sure about that. And then I was sort of reminded myself about a business that do a retro. If there's more than one person in a meeting with somebody externally, then they always do a retro at the end. What worked, what didn't work, what we do the same, what do we do differently? And that's a phenomenal thing for openness and transparency, because then straight away you go, oh, what didn't work for me? Well, I thought I was concerned you may have talked too much and didn't give them a chance to ask the questions. I may be wrong, but that was just a thought I had. And feeding it back like that may be easier for the individual to take on board. And having been in on a lot of those, it's a really positive thing to do. And they're religious about it. Retro at the end of every single session where there's more than one person.
Loving the sound of that. Yeah, interesting perspective, guys. And I think the key to me, this is honest but empathetic feedback. Creates a very direct, saying what you think. Don't bottle it up, but you don't have to be horrible about it, right? You can still be empathetic. So thank you. That was interesting. So that leads us on, I think. That draws a line under our scene for last week. Moves us into red. I believe that is you this week, Ben.
It is for me, yeah. It is for me. And I read something this week that I thought was really interesting. And our listeners may have come across this, right? But it was the first time in the past couple of weeks that I have. And it's this new, I think it's fairly new, but the emergence of this idea of mental health first aid. We often know, we probably all know, if we've ever run a team of any size, that we have a legal obligation to ensure that somebody has some first aid training on our sites. That's just part of the course. Really interesting that they're now extending that concept into the domains of mental health. And clearly very timely. What we've been through in this last year, in many different ways, actually, the pandemic, but also what we're seeing, the changes we're seeing in the world, the new pressures that we're all under, is causing increasing pressure on a lot of people's mental health, on all of us. And yet still, I think you certainly, in my experience, mental health still feels like a sort of an area people are quite frightened to engage with, quite frightened to touch. Not because of any stigma attached to it necessarily, but because of a fear. We don't know what to do. If you think somebody is not mentally well, we perhaps don't have the vocabulary. We're worried about causing offence. We're worried that we might make it worse. So what I found really fascinating was hearing about this sort of mental first aid, and the fact that they've actually taken it into a really simple process that any of us can do, very much like first aid. There are certain things we can all do that reduce the chance of doing any further harm and increase the chance that we may actually be helping. And the particular process I saw was very simple. It was ALGEE, a little acronym. It was approach the person, assess and assist with any crisis. So yes, you should approach if you're worried about someone's mental health. You make an assessment about, is this person having a crisis? Is there something that needs to be done now to keep them safe? The second one was listen and communicate non-judgmentally, which I thought was really interesting. So just give them a chance to talk and offer that non-judgmental listening. Give support and information, but not advice. So potentially just make them aware that there is support available and any information that's provided by the company. encourage the person to consider appropriate professional help and encourage them to consider other supports. And that's just a very simple example. And clearly, in order to do this, there are training programs now available that are very cheap and only a day or two long. But I thought what a wonderful step forward that is, because actually we know that as a society, in many of our organisations, actually, I suspect many of our, we will have encountered people with having mental health problems in our working lives. Perhaps 20 years ago we did but didn't know. Now the odds are we probably will have some awareness of that. And actually, especially for entrepreneurs, knowing what to do about that when you don't have a huge HR function to turn to, I thought was something worth paying attention to. So I offer you guys mental health first aid. Anthony?
Yep, absolutely agree. I've been on the actual other first aid courses, first aid at work and those sorts of things. If somebody falls over or cuts themselves or anything worse, what to do. And this should be compulsory as far as I'm concerned. I think we live in a very different world now. And actually, I think there's more likelihood in certain environments, certainly office environments, that you've got to deal with mental health issue over an accident in the workplace, in a traditional kind of office environment. And quite often I find that people really, really want to help, but they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say, and they don't want to say the wrong thing. So by giving a very simple outline, and I love that, what you've just described there, Ben, everybody, we need to get educated on this stuff. It's thankfully more and more people are talking about it now. Unfortunately, it's way, way more common than we'd like it to be. But actually, the more it gets out there, the more we know how to support each other. I'm sure the easier it will get. I'm sure it will become easier because there's such a stigma with talking about it, isn't there? So I love this, and which is why we kind of, during our editorial, all voted for it to just discuss it and get it out there and talk about it as three middle-aged white men. We're probably in that category of those that don't really... don't really talk about their feelings or don't really share what's going on. So I think absolutely this should be compulsory within every business, because you get this right, you can really open up the opportunity for your staff to grow and deal with these things and know it's a safe place to work and a safe place to deal with these issues. So yeah, I absolutely love it. What are your thoughts, Alex?
Well, I sometimes think on our beloved podcast that we should disagree with each other a bit more, but I can't for this one because it's just such a no-brainer. Not only are it's the right thing to do if you see a fellow human being struggling, and there's a framework to do it. And I like this idea of mental health first aiders, and I agree with you, Andy. It's like almost more likelihood that you're going to need one of them sitting next to you than somebody if you accidentally shove a staple in your thumb and you need a plaster. So I think it's great. And I do think as a founder, it's good business because I've found, looking back now with the hindsight of time, experience, that people I've worked with in offices who are struggling and they're not performing in their business. And it's often something's going on mentally with them. And, before it's like, they're crap, fire them. That's just hugely, you could lose some really good people in a business doing that. So by helping somebody, I think it could build as a business, if you've got this sort of caring side to looking after your colleagues, it's good business as well, because you help them get through it rather than fire them. It's great business, and it's great for the culture of the business again, which is very strong to my heart. Anthony, you've got something to add?
Yeah, no, it just reminds me of, when you send people on these first aid courses, and they've got to bandage people up or whatever it may be. There are some people that are just naturally better at it than others. And we'll have that within our businesses for mental health issues too. There will be people in your business that just feel more comfortable supporting people with mental health issues. And just by we all know who those types of people are, right? And just by giving them some time out to go, well, these are the sorts of recommended steps in order to help people. I mean, it's half a day or a day out of the office that could not only empower them, but actually just really open up the whole business to say, look, we're not scared of mental health. Bring it. We've got people who are now starting to be trained on it, and let's work on this together. Because I'm sure the more and more we talk about it, the easier it will be for people.
It's good. And listen, we should probably move on. But look, I will say some of these courses, I mean, we're talking 200 quid, which, I know is still a lot of money for some entrepreneurs, but actually, for that investment, I think you're almost guaranteed a return in terms of your culture and in terms of, as Alex said, keeping people around who may be having some struggle, they can have some support with and come through. But look, let's move on, because I believe that Alex has learned something. I usually do the learned, Alex. Are you getting in on my turf?
Actually, it's me, Ben. You're missing.
I'm so sorry.
He's too busy having a go at me, isn't he?
He's too busy having a go.
Karma,
Right,
instant karma.
I'll decide whether we edit this out or not. Should we try that again? I believe that Anthony's got to learn for us this week. What are you doing, Anthony?
I absolutely do, Ben. It is down to me. Normally, I don't normally get the learned. It's normally you, Ben. So I'm quite pleased to get the learned this week. So this is a situation. We've actually titled this "The River Doesn't Need Pushing," and the story is an organisation that has a board, right? And there's 6 people on the board. But as they've evolved over the years and taken various investment, they actually have 3 people on the board from one company, right, with one agenda. And their agenda is at odds to the founder and the other 3 members. And it's been incredibly frustrating and incredibly hard work to get things agreed and to things move on. And it's kind of, to a point, stunted the growth of the organisation. And normally in these sorts of circumstances, and this is where the learned comes in, I think we're generally in that kind of thought process of going, right, I've got to do something major. We between the 3 of us, don't we? We called it the keys on the desk moment, where you get the keys to the business and you throw them on the desk. Alex, I think this is one of your experiences previously. And you go, that's it, you run it. But actually you have to look at the impact that's going to have. And what we've learned through this process, actually, by not doing that and by just nudging away at the situation, just by nudging away, slowly but surely, being patient, nudging away, what we've learned actually is by nudging away, it's eventually fallen into place. And we now have a situation where there's been a negotiation, and we now have a situation where actually that balance of power has now shifted. People have taken on board the changes that need to be made, and we now have a far more effective board in this scenario, in this organisation, and they can now actually start achieving what they set out to achieve. And I think it's a huge learn, because I just think as founders, as entrepreneurs, people look at you and go, oh, you're the person that makes the big decisions, aren't you? You're the person that gets that through. You'll get it done. Oh yeah, if I need somebody to go and get something done, I'd come to you and do it. But it's not always that. There aren't always those moments, are they, where you can actually do that? And actually the learning here is no, it's the complete opposite. Let's be patient, but let's keep nudging away. Let's keep making the point. Maybe let's keep building a case or building data to justify, rather than that one huge moment. Because there's, again, in my experience, sometimes there's no turning back from those big moments. Whereas when you're nudging, if you get one of the nudges wrong, you can kind of probably rectify it and then, try something else. Whereas when you make that big moment, very difficult
a big shove.
To come back.
Everyone can fall over. Yeah,
absolutely. So an interesting learn, the river doesn't need pushing. Keep nudging it, make sure it's going off in the wrong direction. Just push it in the other slightly in the other direction, and you'll get the result you're looking for. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I guess it's more like the river might need a bit of a nudge rather than a push. But yeah, I think, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, really, and I didn't have a business that needed a board until we sat in my first board meeting about 6 years ago. So, having a board, I'm kind of understanding a lot about board dynamics at the moment. And, when we discussed the story, I thought, it's very interesting that the chemistry on a board can be very stifling. And, the structure of a board is very interesting. And I think it's very easy. A lot of boards, from my experience, are just stuffed with people who are appointed by the hippo, the highest paid person, the highest paid person's opinion, and they're subjected to that. And I think just having this right balance of a board, especially when it's sort of a key point, is vital. So changing that dynamic, getting the numbers right, making sure that the various stakeholders are represented in the right spread with the right people, it can be very, very sweet when it all comes together, and it can be fantastic for the business. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting one to engage with. I mean, first of all, I love the psychological perspective on the nudge, because and I think Anthony absolutely said it right. If you get a nudge wrong, you can correct it. But if you have flipped the table over and made the mess, very difficult to come back from that. So, and we know this psychologically, right? We've talked about it before. We talk a lot about habits. We talk a lot about incremental small changes often being the best way to achieve a big change. And perhaps the same is true here. But boards itself, very interesting area, I think. It's interesting. I've only ever sat on boards formally that are in businesses that I've had a hand in creating. So I guess I'd reflect back my experience that, honestly, it's always felt like, for me, how a board should be and what a board should be is one of the areas where I've encountered more opinion and more people who think they're right than almost any other part of business. There's always someone who thinks it's like, no, this is what a board should be. This is what a board should be. It's like, wow, okay. So there's so much opinion about that. And I guess how I try to manage it now, and I maybe there's someone listening who's going to call me up and say, no, Ben, absolutely not. That's not how a board should be, because everyone's got a bloody opinion about how boards should be. A board is a group of people who come together for a reason and want to make good decisions. And so for me, I like to start with the fact it's a group of people, and they need to be clear on their purpose. They need to be aligned on the same direction, and they need to be all wanting to go and to achieve the same objective. For me, it just starts with that: a bunch of people going in the same direction, and let's start with that, because often that's the piece that I kind of think gets sort of left behind. There's so much opinion about how a board should run, and Should we just start with that? And actually, I've seen that make a real difference. And when I've sat in boards where actually we are all on the same page and we do all want the same thing, then you can build from there and get the right people in the room and have the right diversity and range of opinions and different styles of thinking, and it all becomes possible. But so many boards I've seen, just they haven't got the purpose right, and they don't actually know why they're in the room. I don't know. Does that help, Alex, or is that a mess?
No, it does. And I think, that is an interesting debate in itself. What do you think a board should be? So, for me, when I was sitting on, when I had my first board was with Roses, and we had this fantastic chairman who didn't say very much, but he sort of sat there and he helped me see things that I couldn't see as the founder of the business, the co-founder of the business, helped me see things that I couldn't see inside the business. So I'd be taught, the example is, we had quite a senior employee. It wasn't working out, and he would come once a month to the board meeting. 3 board meetings in a row, we were complaining about this person, like, oh yeah, it hasn't really worked. This is happening, and this happened. And then he just quietly said to me, he said, Alex, could we agree that we will not discuss this person in the next board meeting? We either will be fixed or the person will not be here anymore. And I thought, that's very, very, and I thought, he's such a good chairman, this guy. That's a really good thing to help founders. I couldn't see that this was a problem. And he always helped me see things with my own eyes inside the business. And that's what I really enjoyed having a board. Eventually, I was very scared to have one. Anthony, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just think that boards can be, where people come to them and they feel that, oh, I'm on the board, I've got to say something, or I've got to give an opinion, or I've got to say something on this point. Whereas actually, the quietest person in the room is often, the person that you tend to probably need to worry about or want to learn their opinion, right? Because they don't have that ego or whatever it is where they feel they have to say something. They're just there and to give you what they believe you need, not just to be there to sound intelligent or to justify their fee. So I love that, but I also, I really want to hone in on Ben's point there is, if you've got people sitting around once a month talking about decisions, is everybody aligned to the purpose? Why are we doing this and why are we here? And if they're not, then I really strongly think, from my own experience, that they shouldn't be on that board. Everybody's got to be aligned to why we do what we do. And if they're not, then They've got to move on, because you're going to stumble along the way.
Yeah, I guess that's what I've always tried to kind of get good at listening out for. I'm always happy to have a debate around how we get there, but by the time you've got a board together, if you're still debating where you're going to go, I don't know if that's entirely sensible. Or at least, once you've had that conversation, the focus should be on how we get there rather than
absolutely
where we're going.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. A board is a group of people. Do you have people aligned to the same process and working toward the same goal? And have the right people in the right room to suit that purpose. And also, the quietest person in the room can often be the person that's going to give you the most. Great stuff.
Well, I think we are at time. Gentlemen, please. So listen, thank you. Another fascinating conversation. Can we manage feedback in our organisation authentically and make sure that those flows are as they should be to help people get the maximum learning they can out of every interaction they have? Can we look at our duty to care not only for the physical but also the mental health of the people who come into our businesses? Could we look at introducing some mental first aid so that people who are perhaps having some challenges in the area can have that support within your business, and maybe that can be good for your business too? And finally, what is a board for? Can we work it out? Can we make sure our boards are aligned on the same page, to the same purpose, so that we can have boards that add huge value to our businesses and take us forward into the future? So it remains to say a massive thank you to Mr. Alex Moore.
Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks.
And an equally magnificent thank you to Anthony Enright.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Alex.
As ever, folks, if you've enjoyed Founder Hacks, if you're enjoying hearing our experiences, please do share. We'd love to hear your experiences and whether you can chuck us some Founder Hacks that we can share with the founders that we're working with and that listen to our podcast. Equally, if you'd like to come join us, if you'd like to be a guest on Founder Hacks, well, we're looking at a schedule for next year where we're going to bring in some other founders of businesses to share their scenes, learns and reads with us. So that we can begin to share a wider range of stories with you all. As ever, I've been Ben Thomas, and this has been Founder Hacks. Thank you very much indeed for listening.